Newcastle City Council has approved a number of heritage listings at its latest council meeting, including a former mayor's house and a conservation area called Cameron's Hill. Now, that has implications for developments in those areas, and council use interim heritage orders to protect the city's built heritage from being lost to what some would describe as inappropriate developments. So what is the process? How is heritage value determined? Jennifer Castaldi is a heritage architect with Artefact and joins us to talk us through the process this morning. Jennifer, hello.
Good, hello.
Thanks for coming on today. Can we just talk about that? Is it all about being old?
No, not at all. I think attitudes have changed towards heritage over time, and we have certain criteria for assessing heritage. So there's actually 7 criteria, and each nominated item will be assessed under those criteria and move to the next level. It's a very sort of strategic process to, I guess, eliminate subjective approach to heritage.
Yeah. Is it all cut and dried though, or does it come down to subjective opinion and is there a fair degree of discretion there, or is it basically a box ticking exercise where everything would pretty much fit within a template?
No, not really. I think often it's driven initially by community for its social and cultural value.
Yeah.
So it really operates because people in the community care and actively sort of stand out for it. It really is about what makes places distinctive and gives them a sense that these areas are worth keeping. So it might range from a very old intact building that's rare in a suburb. It could also be a mid-century building or even something from now, the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned there were 7 categories that were considered as part of this process. Can you talk us through them?
Yep. So historical is if it's significant in the course of the pattern of history, cultural or natural. Historical association is whether it's associated with the life and works of a person or group of people. In New South Wales, cultural or natural history. Aesthetic, creative or technical is if it demonstrates characters or a high degree of creative or technical achievement. Social, cultural, spiritual is if it has special association with a group or community. Research potential is if it has potential to yield information that will contribute to our understanding of New South Wales cultural or natural history. Rare is if it possesses rare or endangered aspects of New South Wales cultural or natural history. And then representation is whether it demonstrates the principal characteristics of a class of New South Wales cultural or natural places or environments. So it doesn't have to be a building. It has many variations on what a heritage item could be. It could be a landscape or a bridge or a memorial.
Could be a garden, could be a backyard, for argument's sake.
Yes. Yeah. So there's there's a lot of opportunity to preserve things that wouldn't typically be a building. Yep.
Jennifer, this is a prescription from the state government, obviously. What sort of a role does council play? Do they basically just interpret as part of this process?
Council, typically council would complete a study of heritage items, and they would engage consultants to investigate heritage items in the area. There is an alternative pathway. You could nominate an item independently. Newcastle Council has a form on their website. Yep. So basically anyone could do it.
Yeah. So some of this stuff is reactionary, right? So neighbours hear that a development is proposed in an area and they go, "Oh, hang on, you can't do this or you can't do that." But in other occasions or on other occasions, I imagine communities are proactive. They look at an old house or, an old asset and say, "Well, we should do something to make sure that this doesn't become a problem in the future."
Yeah, and I think we've seen that with suburbs like Paddington and the Rocks, where there was a big threat to the suburbs, and they were preserved by such things as green bans
Yep.
in the 70s and 80s.
So what about making the case then? What level of evidence is required to substantiate those 7 points that you mentioned and the connection that a particular property or asset has with the history of the state of New South Wales?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that research is the key to it, and that's it has to be substantive to the cause. We use various aspects. We use old rates books or the SANS directory to show ownership. We use historical articles, newspapers and journals. Trove, which is an online resource, is very useful, and even oral histories. So I think the main point is you have to be accurate. You can't make up facts,
Jennifer, how do you feel about the process at the moment? Because, clearly you need progress. We don't all be living in miners' cottages still. We want to recognise and remember the history and pay due deference to it, but you don't want to keep 1,000 miners' cottages, for example. So how is the balance? How would you describe it as someone who works in that space?
Well, I think it's really important to make it clear to owners that although a heritage listing or being in a heritage conservation area basically requires you to maintain your property and ensure that it's resilient against weather events and wear and tear, it doesn't completely restrict you from what you can do. You can definitely innovate. You just have to do it in a sensitive manner.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of opportunity for adaptive reuse of older buildings as well.
Yeah, is it possible to mount an argument that the obligations of maintaining a historical property are just too onerous? In other words, it would be so expensive to try and maintain it. Is that an argument for demolition, for example?
I guess that's where people have differences of opinion where you need to involve structural engineers and I think any building needs to be maintained, and perhaps just because something's been left to a state of dilapidation doesn't mean it can't be brought back.
Yeah, okay. Look, you've given us a great understanding of what goes on behind the scenes to try and make these determinations. I appreciate you coming on, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Castaldi, who's a heritage architect with a firm called Artefact.